It's the same with the affluent here. They did the same. And interestingly enough, their expenses here listed for committees, for the Grandsire Archon.
This series is dedicated to Brother Steve Coakley.
No beginning, there ain't no ending, just on and on and on and on and on. It's all because they're so afraid to say that they're alone. Until our hero rides in on his saxophone. Or could you call on Lady Day? And could you call on John Coltrane? Now, 'cause they'll wash your troubles, your troubles, your troubles, troubles away.
The black identity crisis is at the forefront of white supremacy. For the last 400 years, so-called blacks have been spoon-fed their history by a peoples whose history only began with the destruction of theirs. Most assuredly, the color-based caste system of race we know today as simply white meaning European and black meaning African was not in play during the European takeover of the Americas. The color lines were significantly more blurred. The rise of the so-called white identity is truly an American construct born in the 17th century as a method of social classification for the purposes of distinguishing rights between Christians, Confederate Indians, and captives. Throughout the entirety of colonization, the terms used to identify captured Indians changed several times before the 1900s. This formulated methodology is at the crux of the contrived black identity in America. To assume the Europeans who sailed to the Americas under the Spanish, English, or French flag were not dark-skinned would be an asinine assumption. To assume the ruling families of Europe weren't dark-skinned or swarthy would be an asset 10 assumption.
Walt Frazier, blasphemous!
To assume that those same Europeans knew nothing about the Americas is an ass 11 assumption.
He's got the nerve, the audacity, the unmitigated gall.
To assume that all black Americans are a product of the transatlantic slave trade would be an ass 12 assumption.
Absolute blasphemy.
To assume that all skin folk are kinfolk is an ass 13 assumption.
I'm not gonna be blasphemous and say that.
And to assume your grandmother was lying to you about having Indian in your family should get your ass slapped, boy.
It's just so disrespectful for you to say something like that.
The problem with accepting institutional indoctrination, it tends to lead itself into pretentious presuppositions by those newly indoctrinated about those who aren't.
I spent $100 to find out I'm black. That shit said 77% African, 13% European, and there was some miscellaneous shit. I was like, yeah, that's a slave. Yep. Yep, that's a fucking slave right there. Wasn't no Indian in that motherfucker. Anybody here that's black, you know, we've been told when we was growing up that we had Indian in our family. I got my results. I called my grandmother immediately. I said, you a lying motherfucker. No goddamn Indian. When the fuck was niggas and natives hanging out?
I got my results. I called my grandmother immediately. I said, you a lying motherfucker.
The two distinct lines in the sands of deception for black America were first Christianity and then education. At the foundation of both was the master plan of the colonizer to divide the black masses into opposing factions for the purposes of puppeteering movements and perpetrating conformity within the collective psyche of the black masses.
Or could you call on Lady Day? And could you call on John Coltrane? Now, 'cause they'll wash your troubles, your troubles, your troubles, your troubles away.
At the pinnacle of the so-called black hierarchy in the early stages of American inception were indeed Freemasons. This list consists of the most prominent blacks involved in the establishment of nearly all African Methodist Episcopal churches throughout the entire United States. Masonic membership was a precursor to prominence for blacks seeking influence and power. The ranks of Masonic credibility, however, would soon divide these blacks from white Freemasons with the creation of the Prince Hall Lodge in 1784. Until this point, blacks were included in membership along with other Masons, as many of the founding members had earned their Masonic degrees abroad, but American lodges were far less willing for acceptance.
Long as I have my clams, I don't give a damn about muddy water.
The black experience in America during colonial times did not entirely consist of slavery. Free black cities thrived, even in the South. Many of the places well known for being major slave ports were influential black cities. Two of these cities being Charleston, South Carolina, and New Orleans, Louisiana. In fact, by 1868, dozens of black Republicans ran for office in Louisiana, culminating in the election of Oscar Dunn, who, of course, was a Prince Hall Freemason. But who exactly was Prince Hall?
Long as I have my clams, I don't give a damn about muddy water. Long as I have my clams, I don't give a